Welcome back to the Building Pathways to Healthy Minds podcast, where we share real world strategies to nurture children as they grow. And I am your host, Priscilla Bagley. So happy to be back and talking to Gretchen Lash for part 2 of our Resilience podcast, where we talked about how the world is a better place because our children are in it, how we can nurture that in them, and then letting our kids fall sometimes, and how to help them get back up. And all of that leads to problem-solving skills later in life. And we also chatted about how hard things happen to all of us. It's just a part of life. And as parents or educators, we can model for our children how to get back up after we fall and have those hard conversations. So I'm hoping you have a great time listening to part 2 of Resilience and Stand Strong, Stay Safe. And in some ways, us being privileged allows us to stop our kids from failing.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got like this really great building blocks of nurturing and love, hopefully, and all those things, but they don't have the sense of, I am important, this job is important. And how do we build that? It's very hard. It's hard.
No, I think that's the epidemic right now, right? That is what kids are dealing with in a lot of privileged communities where they do have those foundations and they're not, struggling hand to mouth, right?
Right.
Everything's good. Everything looks shiny, right? Everything is the way we all wish it would be. And yet they have, by the time they're graduating high school, they have very little ability to solve their own problems once they get out into the real world, which is why this is real. My kids have cousins who are in college, and not that they're experiencing this, but there definitely are friends whose parents are still involved in their day-to-day life at 19, 20 years old when they're off at college, living in a dorm or living in an apartment. Parents are still clinging on to the pillows to keep them safe, keeping a bubble around them, and almost by necessity at this point, because the kids
would not know what to do.
Either they don't have to, or they choose not to, or they literally don't have those coping skills, which is really tricky because you think they would be resilient, coming from this background, but I think maybe not. I think maybe they have a different kind of vulnerability, and they've never really been tested.
I think that's why when you mentioned a few weeks ago that it's really important for our kids to see us sometimes go through things, I think that's why that really struck a chord with me, because as parents, we often want to hide those things from our kids. And we are living in a society, many of us, that we can afford to really protect our kids and want them to succeed. And so we can't, we don't want to put our kids in situations where it's a really, really bad thing. But maybe we can talk about this was a really bad thing for me. This was a really hard, just going to a personal place of our move from Tyler was my daughter's kind of first time where it was kind of a big deal. Like, she was leaving her best friend. She was leaving the house that she had really known. Because our move there, she was really small. And so, talking that through, like, well, none of us wanted to move. This thing happened and we had to move. And this was really hard. And so this is what we do when we encounter something really hard. Also, it's okay that we're sad. I'm sad too. I'm angry too. But I'm still going to pack this box because I got to pick myself up and we have to move on. And so instead of hiding that and just being like, well, all is okay and, it's going to work out in the end, we show our kids there's something stronger within us that's getting us through.
Exactly. You were modeling for her the choice part. So yes, this thing and the stress part, the management, self-regulation part, but this thing happened to us. Okay, that does happen, right? Things do happen to us. But then what choice do we make when that happens?
Yeah.
And making that explicit for our kids as we're going through them, but maybe even also narrating those choices as our kids are navigating the little things. So I'm trying to figure out how to get back to the missing homework scenario where, you know, it's, oh, this happened, or you forgot, and now you're going to get a consequence at school for not having, and a lot of times I think for kids that consequence isn't so much the grade, it's the shame that they
Exactly.
kind of heap on themselves about the failure.
Mhm.
And now, okay, so you feel this, honey, this you're
Mhm.
going through this. I can't bring your homework to you, so you're going to have to feel this. I mean, and that's always convenient if you really can't bring it.
Right. Right.
That's
Exactly.
always
It's always helpful when it's literally you can't save them
right,
in the
exactly. Maybe
moment.
we just have to say, no, I can't. It's not that it's hard. That's really hard. I
It's
find that
so
really
hard.
difficult. But
It's so
no, I
hard.
really can't do this for you right now. And yes, you're gonna feel some things about it. And what are you going to choose to do about that tomorrow? What choice
Yeah.
are you going to make when you're packing your bag tomorrow?
Mm.
And I mean, I'm thinking about this in my head. And again, Asa would totally make the choice to just completely forget his homework the next day, too.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of parenting. I don't know. And it's part of resilience and the messiness that is parenting. It's like, doesn't mean, boom, it's all perfect the next time. You're going to fail and you get back up. You're going to fail, you get back up. Um,
Well, and with sort of along those lines, there's sort of fail small and
mhm.
fail tiny
Yeah.
and fail bigger, right? There's sort of shades. So whereas Asa and the homework situation, that is not even going to be a blip on his radar the first like 10 times that it happens.
Right.
At the end of the grading period, when he has 10 math assignments to do tonight,
Yeah.
then he feels it. And over the last couple of months, this is something that we've been dealing with. We have tried to, okay, we're going to sit down and we'll help you with your math and we're going to sit with you. He spends 90% of that time tantruming about how he's not going to do it.
Yeah.
We try to point out that he can and is perfectly capable of doing it, and if he just sat down and stopped having a fit, he would be able to do it.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite things to say in the house is if you had just started this instead of whining, it would already be done. It would already be done.
Be done.
Which is
Just
like,
practical.
I still say it. I don't think that's helpful because I say it then yet the next day and the next. Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be
It's
sticking.
not.
But so we've done that now 3 or 4 times. He's in seventh grade, so over the course of his middle school career, this has been kind of a constant battle. um, and he's turning the corner now because he has realized, like, I don't like how that feels. And I think he's started to believe that he can change the outcome.
Mm,
And that's another thing, a point that I wanted to make about resilience. And it goes back to the plasticity, the brain sort of plasticity, but it's also
mhm.
an attitude, right?
Yeah.
So if I go down this path, can I change my mind? Like, can I
Mm,
evaluate, is this where I want to be going? And say yes or no, and then make a change.
yeah.
So part of resilience is, and it makes a lot of sense if you think about it as, I walked down this path and I fell and I'm down, right? So I'm not self-evaluating, is this where I want to be? This is where I am, and this is where I shall stay. Or I walked down this path and I fell. And I think to myself, is this where I want to be? Is this where I want to stay? Wait, hold up. No, this is not who I am. I am not
Yeah.
the person who stays down on the path and then right? You change, you get up, you go down the path a different way. So that flexibility of thinking, and that kind of, there's a persistence that's
Mm,
involved there
Yeah.
And there's an ability to sort of adapt to the situation and modify your choice depending on the outcomes that you're seeing happen. Um, and so maybe kind of what you're doing in the situation with the move, what I'm doing with this ongoing debate with Asa over his math homework, um, is sort of modeling that self-talk of, is this where you want to be going? Is this
Yeah.
the direction you want to go? And do you want to just be, sad and depressed about not having your friends anymore? Or do you want to say, here I am in a new place. What choice am I going to make next?
Yeah.
And I think that the modeling and the talking through it and the kind of narrating the experience that you're doing and that I'm doing as parents in that situation is helping to build that outlook, right? That
Yeah.
perspective on the world.
When I think that ties into I matter in the world, or I want to matter in the world. So these choices, maybe I can get up and I either go a different way on the path or I choose a different path because I don't like falling down right here and staying here. And I'm going to choose something different.
That's the pinnacle of it, to be able to just self-evaluate, decide, where am I
Mhm.
going, right?
Yeah.
Where do I want to go? What kind of impact do I want to have on the world around me? So to get there, you have to first not be crushed by, because that can be crushing for some people. It's like,
Yeah.
I was on this path and then the path wasn't serving me
Or,
anymore,
or the path got ripped out from
or the
under me.
path got ripped out. I mean, we know people in our lives where this is like, you're on the path gets ripped out, or it's not serving you. And that's a huge crisis. Like,
Mhm.
that's midlife crisis, right? That's,
Yeah.
I don't know who I am or what I'm doing anymore. But
Yeah.
then to be able to say, well, okay, what other path do I want to take? And to have that perspective, I mean, I think that is a great privilege, to have that belief. It's like a core memory, right? Core value, core belief,
Mhm.
um, that I choose this, right? I make a choice and I go down this path. And what happens to me. And then I respond to that and I keep going.
Yeah.
Is That's what I want for my kids.
But I think us
Sure.
talking to our kids about that is it's not the our family's going hungry from not having milk
Right.
scenario,
Right.
but it is saying you have choices and what you do matters. The choice you make matters. So maybe resilience in parenting has changed over the decades, from when our parents were little, but it's still something we aspire to.
Something that my husband and I talk about quite often is that personality, and yeah, basically personality comes from three main factors. And we talked about this a little bit already, but I think I just want to reemphasize. There's the genetic factor. So what you're born with in your DNA.
Hmm.
Okay. Then there's the upbringing factor, like what you're born into, what kind of environment you're in for the early years of your life, and that changes you, right? That activates certain parts of your genetics or deactivates certain parts of your genetics, and there's a relationship between those two factors. We used to call it nature versus nurture, and it used to be
Exactly.
like two options. It's either nature or nurture, and then we were like, oh, we're smarter than this. It's probably both.
Hmm.
But then it's actually also our narrative, our story about what gives what gives us meaning. So what does this experience of life mean to us? And that narrative, that story of who we are, I tell myself I'm this kind of person, right? I am I am the person who fails math. And therefore, when my friends tease me about being the person who fails math, Well, I'm like, yeah, obviously, I'm the dude who fails math.
Hmm.
Or I'm not the person who fails math. I'm the person who had some struggles with math and have been working really hard to fill those gaps over the last since COVID, basically.
Yeah.
And now I really am the person who understands math. I want to be that person. That's my narrative. So when my friends tease me about my failure, I feel that as a tension. And I say, no, I'm not that person. I'm not that person
Yeah.
you're telling me I am. And I'm going to show you. So that story of we tell ourselves about who we are is almost as important as the nature and nurture kind of pure forms. Um, and and so I think what we can help our kids do, no matter where they're coming from, no matter what environment we're trying to parent in, whether it's sort of classically privileged or not, is help them build a story about who they are and what impact they have on their world and what matters.
Yeah.
Because we can do that in any setting. And I think that comes down to when the little things happen, like I'll think of an example in a minute, but when the little things go wrong or whatever, the story we contextualize that in is you can figure this out,
Yeah.
or you can get through this, or I will help you get through this, or it will be okay. So, not exactly to put, like you were mentioning with your story about moving to Tyler, you didn't want to just cover it with this positive shine of like,
Yeah.
it's going to be great and everything's going to be wonderful. Stop feeling bad, right?
Yeah.
It's not quite that, but it's more so, yes, it feels bad and this is hard, but we are moving towards something and we're going to make new choices and different choices and have opportunities as a result of this change. So,
And and the question, who do we want to be at the end of this?
right.
Which is so important. It's like building our own stories.
Yeah.
Um, but we can change that story. We can, there's a book, I think it's Ian Faulkner, the author that did Olivia, I think. I'll have to research this because I didn't know we were talking about this today. But he talks about it's like the story of the three bears, but it's like the three dinosaurs. And Goldilocks comes in the house, and there's all these. Have you seen this one? Or so it's
No.
okay. She comes in the house, and there's all these like obvious signs that it's not the three bears house. It's like there's all these like the kitchen counters like super tall, and like the beds. It's like so obvious, but at the end, the dinosaurs are coming home. They've been tricking her because they want to eat her. And the last line is or one of the last lines is something like, if you find yourself in the wrong story, um, basically go somewhere else, you know, like,
Oh
which
my
is such,
gosh.
which is such a good, like such a deep concept for a kid's picture book. It's like when you find yourself in the wrong story, or maybe when you're telling yourself the wrong narrative or something that's not necessarily true, resilience is part of that. Get into a different story, find a new path, you know, change the narrative, change the story. Um, and yeah, pick yourself up and try again. And
Absolutely.
yeah, huge.
Absolutely. And I love that. I definitely want to link to that
Yeah,
to
I
my
wrote it
book. You
down to
definitely have to do that.
double check author. But it was like eye opening for me as an adult. And so often I just go along with whatever's been told to me. And there's times where I can pick myself up, dust myself off maybe and say, I'm not going to believe that. And I can find a new story. I can reinvent, and so much of this is, it's not some like perfect story of like, let's get up and let's be someone different. And that's not really what I mean by it. I mean, even just the gritty everyday of, I'm not going to let anxiety and depression define me right now, or I'm not going to let this move that was really hard impact the me forever. And that's messy, and that's like getting up every day and saying, what am I going to learn from this today, and what story am I going to choose to believe today?
Oh, absolutely. It's so important. Um, and I think that goes back to everything that we've talked about when it comes to parenting. Maybe this is why it's kind of complicated for us to develop the little sort of parenting webinars and workshops that we do at Child Builders is because it's hard to kind of bring everything into 3 bullet points of recommendations that if you do these 3 things, parenting is going to you're going to be a successful parent.
Mm,
I mean, I really think that plays into the whole myth of perfectionism, kind of, where if we just do these right things exactly
right.
like the book said, or exactly like, I don't know, the TikTok video said, or whoever's giving us our advice these days, then we will be doing it all the right way and we will be the perfect parents. But then when we get deeper in the conversation, which this podcast is letting us do, kind of wrestle with it a little bit in conversation, in relationship with each other. Honestly, we're back
Yeah.
and forth and wrestling with our own ideas and matching it up to what we know of the research and our experience teaching and our experience in workshops. We always come to the conclusion that it's in the mess, it's in the uncertainty, it's in that vulnerability that we have to sit there. We have to be in it
Hmm.
in order to, I don't know, find the answer that we're looking
Yes.
for, right? In order to be the responsive and positive parents that we're trying to be.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know if that's because no parents are alike, no kids are alike. Everything is just kind of a little bit responding and reacting to the situation you're in. Um, but I guess where I kind of bring that together is, and since we are here to talk about strategies to help build
Yes.
resilience in your child, and you don't want to leave without like having, okay, what do I do now, right?
Right.
I think it's about building that narrative for your whatever's happening, building that narrative for your family, for your child, that supports what we know resilience is, right? Which is, we talked about coping and stress management, right? We talked about having healthy self-regulation, coping and stress management. And we talked about having agency and the ability to know that what you do affects the world and the choices you make can change the outcome,
Mm,
and having a positive outlook that this is going somewhere, right? I don't know where the path is going, but this is going somewhere. And
yeah.
there will be new opportunities at the end of this path, if I just get up and keep going, just that
Right.
type of positive outlook. Um, I mean, I think those are the main things. And then
And
having,
I,
confidence that you can keep going down
yes,
the path.
yes. Another piece I was looking at of something I was researching yesterday was the piece of encourage problem solving, is not just telling our kids how they should think or how they should react, or it can start as the smallest things. I think I learned that as an educator, that instead of when a question's asked just giving the answer, putting it back and saying, well, why do you think that happened? What do you think about that? And it's so funny because as a parent, there's so often where I forget that little skill where I'm like, gosh, we're late or we're tired, or I'll just answer this question. So just lately, I've kind of stepped back to that skill where if Noelle asks me something, trying to put it back on her to figure out why. Like, why do you think that is the way it is? And so encouraging, I think that's a pretty concrete way to kind of start helping build resilience. Like, why did that happen? Why do you think? And what can we do from here? Avoid just jumping in and saving. Because often, it's hard to let our child like fail an assignment. But what we could do is not jump in on a day-to-day basis with questions and answers, and letting them sit in the mess too and try to figure out.
So exactly. So there's reflecting the question back to them. Like as far as a tangible strategy,
Yeah.
when your child asks you a question, reflect their question back to them, especially if it's a why question. And that's really fun with toddlers because they're asking why questions as soon as they can talk.
All the time.
And and then they come up with really crazy ideas about why. If you don't just feed them the answer, they almost don't want you to. They almost
Yeah.
it's almost just a platform
The
for
curiosity.
them to explore and spin this story. So totally encourage that. That's awesome. In play too, I'm just thinking about all the hours that I spent and my husband spent playing with Legos with my kids and trying to build the biggest tower. And and I think what he was so good at is modeling that kind of playful exploration, kind of scientific testing thing that kind of can come out of that type of play where you
Like
are,
you have a
I mean,
question and
right.
you,
He would say, how do we get this tower to be taller than you, to the
Mhm.
little 3-year-olds, which is super fun to build a tower that's taller than them.
Yeah.
Um, but with whatever you have, how do we get this tower to be taller than you? And then try things. And what if we did this? Oh, let's try to do that. And kind of ask questions of the kids, but also just verbalize the question that he's asking as he's playing and
Mm.
then listen to when they're asking similar questions and encourage them to find the answer. Well, what if we used only green Legos? Would that change it? I don't know. Why don't you try? And just uh, encourage that type of play.
And in that, teaching them how to problem solve in a fun
Exactly.
way so that when a bigger problem comes, they have those skills to be able to go, I can think through this. Like I can
Yeah.
think through this and I can evaluate and choose a story, choose a path from here.
I don't know. That feels like a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah. Again, maybe this is especially if people have questions and we have the spot on our on childbuilders.org where you can come and leave questions. And if there's more questions and desire for another episode on resilience, I think it'd be really neat to dive even deeper into that. Yeah. If there was one piece of this whole conversation that you just want to circle back around and say, this is what I want to leave listeners with, what would that be?
So I would go back to what you said at the very beginning about how resilience sounds like this great idea that all of us should have. And that would be wonderful if we could all help encourage resilience in our kids. But recognize that it is multifaceted. There are many different pieces to put together, and we can't control all of them for our kids.
Mhm.
So we can take some advice about different strategies to use. Um, but it's a lifelong journey, I think. So I think the bottom line that I try to keep in mind is create a nurturing environment for my kids to the
Mhm.
extent that I'm able to, that is predictable and like they know what to expect when they come home. They know we have dinner every night. We have family dinner. That's one of the things we do. Maybe that's not one of the things everybody does. Maybe everybody gets together at Sunday lunch, after church
Mhm.
or something like that. There's something that they can count on at home. And they can also count on my reaction when they bring something to me. So they know I'm not going to be too terribly shocked. They know I'm going to be able to listen to what they have to say. So the things that
Emotionally
they
safe.
can count on, exactly, that create an emotionally safe, nurturing environment for my teenagers right now. And then beyond that, how I interact with their choices, how I encourage their narrative, and try to move it in a direction of I can do this, I can get back up, my decisions matter, um, my impact on the world can be positive, and just try to keep those values in mind when I'm talking to them about their next steps.
Mm, I love that. It's like helping our kids write their stories.
Exactly.
Love that. Well, I enjoyed today so much. And I hope all of you all that are listening and driving and or sitting and enjoying this had a great time, and that you walk away with some tools or just more knowledge about our kids, more knowledge about our students, the kids we love in our lives, and how to help them build resilience. So we'll sign off and say, stand strong, stay safe, and have a great, great day. Thank you all. And thanks, Gretchen.
Thank you.
Bye. That was Raising Resilient Kids Part 2, where Gretchen and I broke down how we can have resilience and how we can model that for our children, and how falling down and getting back up is all part of life. We can talk to our kids about doing hard things, how they matter to the world, how they can manage stress, and how all of those things build resilience. I hope you got a lot out of it today. We hope to see you next time where we talk about anxiety in parenting. And as always, we would love to hear comments or future episode ideas. Please follow us and comment on our webpage, childbuilders.org, or right here on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Leave us a comment. We would love to hear from you. Until then, thank you for grabbing a cup of coffee, sitting with us today, or traveling and listening to us. We hope that you stand strong, stay safe. Bye.